All right, so hopefully you guys can hear me. I had to set up a few things, but as you can see, I got a new camera. So from now on, I'm going to be using this for our live streams so that it could be high quality stuff and not just the 240. Because the last camera that I normally have on my computer is pretty bad. So I have to use this camera. So I'm going to start using this camera instead. I bought it on Amazon and it works pretty well. So, that's what I'm going to do now in our live streams. So I just want to let you guys know that. And then if there's any questions, let me know. Shoot your questions out. I'm probably not going to do this as long as last time, only probably 40 minutes long. But if you have any questions about the series that I finished, the Counterphobia series, you can ask. If you have any questions about stuff I'm working on in the future, you can ask. But hopefully you guys like the new setup that I kind of did. It's not really a new setup, but it's obviously much more high quality. So hopefully it works out. And so yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I try to get a better one. I try to get one that had like 4K, but it's really hard to find those on the internet and they're pretty expensive. So I just decided to go with just kind of an upgraded one, this one for now. Maybe a few years down the line, I'll get a better one. But for now, I think this should be pretty good. And as you can see, pretty much my whole room now. So it's not just my face, but you also see my clothes. And so, yeah. If you guys have any questions, this is a live Q&A session. So just shoot your questions up and I'll try to answer them the best I can. So. My next series is going to be on what I call the foundation theory. It's going to be based around Joshua Rasmussen's work. I've asked him if I could do that video series, and he told me that's fine. Now he's working on his own video series on the same topic, but his is much more longer. Well, not longer, but it's taken him longer to make. So the next series is going to be called the foundation theory. What I'm going to do is pretty much show that that reality has some sort of foundation by which everything is built upon, or at least all contingent things are dependent on this foundation. And then I'm going to go into what the nature of that foundation is. And I'm basically going to go over things like, why this foundation has to be eternal, necessary. And then I'm going to have to explain like how this foundation theory can explain things like minds, matter, or morals, values, stuff like that. So that'll be my next big series. I was gonna do my free will stuff, but I have to wait because that's gonna be a side project that I'm gonna do on the side. So I'm not gonna really. What I'm gonna do basically is I'll work on the series that the next series is going to be on the foundation theory. So I'm going to work on that. And then I'm going to use any free time I have, I'll spend that time working on the documentary, the free will documentary, but that won't be out for a while because it's going to take some time to actually make. And it's probably going to be about an hour long because the script is just based off of my essay that I did 6 months ago. The script alone is gonna be pretty long, so it's gonna be a pretty long video, and it's gonna take some time to make. And I didn't want, I want new content to come out. I want to try to make it where I have some sort of content come out every week. So regardless if that's a video or if it's like a book review or if it's just a live stream like this or if it's like an interview with someone else, I want to try to at least have one video come out each week. And if I don't have a video come out each week, I'll try to let my subscribers know that I won't be producing any more content for that week. So again, that's kind of the goal that I'm trying to do right now, is basically have content out every week, regardless if it's, a video, live stream, whatever. I just want something to come out every week. Doesn't really matter what it is, but it has to come out. So that's pretty much the goal of at least trying to get this channel going. And then once I complete all the other stuff I'm working on, then I'll eventually get to other topics. But for now, I'll just, again, the two big projects I'm working on is the Foundation Theory series, which is to be the next series, and then my documentary, which that won't be out for a while. But what I'll do is I'll probably do an update video regarding that documentary, and then I'll release the trailer, and then I'll have a second update video to kind of go over everything and all that stuff, and then I'll release the actual documentary. But again, that's gonna take a very long time. So it might not be out until next year. We'll see. But yeah. Since you're doing a series on the metaphysical foundation, do you think metaphysical foundationalism entails? Well, I would say I am a foundationalist in the epistemic sense. I'm not sure if it entails it, but it's possible. But yeah, I mean, metaphysical foundationalism, some people confuse it with theism, but it's actually not theism. Now, foundationalism itself is a form of, that could be a form of theism, but I know there's other there's forms of naturalism that could be compatible with metaphysical foundationalism. And the basic idea behind that theory is that reality has a foundation. Like, there's this thing in reality that is the necessary thing by which all other things exist by, regardless if you're a theist, or again, I mean, theism kind of requires that. But as a naturalist could also accept some form of that, where you say that the necessary foundation for reality is like, a natural thing or whatever, like a natural substance or whatever. I know, like, people like Graham Oppy try to say that the foundation is the universe. I don't necessarily agree with that, obviously. I don't think the universe is the foundation for reality. So obviously it had to be, if you're a naturalist, you have to say there's something more foundational than the universe that's natural. That would be the foundation for reality. But yeah, I'm not sure I don't think it entails it, but what I'm basically going to be showing is that metaphysical foundationalism is almost certainly true. That there is something in nature that has to exist. And again, you don't have to be a theist to accept that premise. You could be a naturalist and accept that premise. So, that's how it is. All right. And your last, hold on. Let me try to fix this, because this camera is really, it shows everything. So I gotta, okay. In your last video on quantum hermeneutics, you said hell is basically when your mind is cut out from the mind of the all. So in the afterlife, if they ask to get out of, yes. Well, that's the thing, right? So God can, or at least they can get out of hell, but they're gonna have to get sanctified, and most people that are in hell don't want to be sanctified. That's why they're there. That's pretty much why they're in hell in the first place, because they don't want to be sanctified. They don't want to be with God. So of course they're gonna decide just to stay there. I mean, that's basically what hell is. I mean, it's not really, it's not this in Dante's Inferno type of hell. It's basically, my own view is that it's really no more different than our world. The only difference, of course, is, in hell, there won't be any churches, there won't be any like worship services, stuff like that. So I wouldn't say it's cut off in the sense that you're not connected, you're not in a high sufficient connection to God. But I would say even those that are in hell still depend on God for their existence, but they choose to reject the very thing that makes them exist, if you want to put it like that. But yeah, so how does Oppy argue that the universe was created I don't think he does. If we're talking about creation in the sense that God created, well, obviously he doesn't believe in that God created the universe. But Oppy would say that the universe is the ultimate reality. So basically our universe is, I guess you could say it's eternal, but I know he'd probably go with like a multiverse theory. Maybe, I'm not sure. But basically the idea is that nature, like if we're talking about nature, okay, what we mean by nature is we're talking about the universe. It could be our universe or it could be a multiverse. Regardless, nature is necessary. Like it has to exist. So therefore it's the foundation for reality. So that's basically, that's naturalism for you right there. That's the basic idea. I know, I'm sure Graham Oppy, I'm sure he believes in the Big Bang, but he probably holds like some cosmological model that tries to argue for an eternal universe or something like that. So yeah. Do you hold to A theory or B theory? I hold to B theory, but I'm happy to change my mind. The only reason why I hold to B theory is because I don't think A theory makes any sense with relativity. But I've been reading Edward Fraser, for example. So I do think there is a way you can try to make it fit. I just think it's ad hoc. I think that trying to make A theory fit with relativity is just, you're going to have to make some additional ad hoc assumption about relativity, and that's not, if relativity does not require that assumption, then you don't need it in the theory. And that's basically the whole point, that it's basically ad hoc, and that's why I don't accept it. So sorry for the background noise. My parents are in the house, but yeah. So yeah, I do hold to B theory, but again, I'm willing to change my mind. There's a new theory. It's called C theory, and basically the idea is that time doesn't even exist. So I'm open to that hypothesis as well, but I'll have to look into it more. So let's see. I love your channel and your content. Now I am looking at the Idealism Metaphysical Castro. Why does he avoid theism, and what mistakes do you see? I don't think he avoids theism at all. He actually does refer to universal consciousness as God in his book. The only issue is that his version of God wouldn't be my version of God. So basically, our views of universal consciousness are different in the sense that he thinks that God is like just this conscious thing that doesn't really have any thoughts or emotions, but kind of just is experience in and of itself. Or you could say he calls it mind at large, but you could, it's basically, I guess you could say it's more of it's a deistic version of classical theism. So basically the idea is that God doesn't have the same sort of like emotions that we do. He doesn't have the same sort of thoughts that we do. Rather, he's just consciousness in and of itself. And that's pretty much it. He can't really react to things. He doesn't have those sort of qualities that human beings do. So his version of God would be probably more compatible with like a classical theistic version of God. But at the same time, it's deistic. So in that sense, God wouldn't care about mankind. So that's, I don't think he avoids theism, but I think it's more of like a deism type of God where, yeah. So I hope I answered your question, but yeah. All right. Church history is taught eternal conscious I guess I'm assuming that's torment. How has that been understood, and how do you understand it? Well, actually, I don't hold to eternal conscious torment. I don't know. I shouldn't say that, because I hold to a hybrid model. So I'm open to universalism. So that's still an option. I do think that universalism is the most probable, in the sense that I think it's more probable that everybody will eventually be saved. But of course, I could be wrong there. So if I'm wrong there, then I think what's going to happen is those that are in hell are either going to be stuck there forever, or some of them will be annihilated. So basically, I think that it's kind of like there are going to be some souls in hell that will stay, in hell forever. There's others that I think a certain group of souls in hell that are also going to be annihilated. Now, I want to be very careful what I mean by annihilated. I'm not saying that consciousness can be annihilated. I don't actually think that consciousness could be annihilated. I think that's metaphysically impossible. I don't think you could truly annihilate consciousness, because if consciousness is the foundation for reality, then you can't annihilate the foundation for reality. So I think what instead that's going to happen is, for those that are annihilated, what will happen is basically they'll get all their memories, all their emotions, and all their personalities destroyed. And then they'll just have like this, I don't know, you can call it consciousness simpliciter, or basically like those that get annihilated are basically, they're not truly annihilated, but they are annihilated, that they don't have their personalities or their emotions or stuff like that. So they basically, if you want to simplify it, it's basically, I do think that they lose their ego, basically. And so they don't lose their consciousness, because you can't destroy that. Not even God can destroy that. But they do lose their what's called their ego, and that's basically their thoughts, emotions, all that stuff. So I do hold to a hybrid model of hell, where some are going to be there forever and others are going to be there, others are going to be annihilated. But yeah, but that's pretty much how I understand it. Basically, people that eternally reject God is yeah. So what is your least favorite argument for God's existence? I was going to say probably arguments from beauty, because I think beauty is something that's subjective. And some people would try to say, oh, it's objective. I don't think it's objective at all. I've tried to look at arguments for why it's objective. I just don't. I'm not convinced by it, because if I go to some other culture, they're going to view beauty in a completely different way than I do. So I don't think that argument could work. I would say, I would even say that it's worse than Pascal Wagers. Even though Pascal Wagers is an interesting argument, I think it's worse than that, because it's based on yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's my least favorite argument. But yeah, I hope I answer your question. But, all right. Why do you say the moral argument is not valid, despite the fact that metaethics recognize a foundation in some things? Well, it depends on what type of moral argument. So, for example, I don't think that Craig's moral argument works. It's valid, but it doesn't work in that sort of way. I do think that you can make a moral argument. So in order to do that, I think the best way you can do that is basically what I call a moral contingency argument. And the basic idea behind that type of argument would be, you would have to argue that morality cannot be grounded in a contingent source. So basically, if morality can be grounded in something, it has to be what's called a necessary source, or a necessary foundation for morality. Now, in fact, I'm going to actually go over morality in one of my videos in my future series. So I'll kind of get there. I'm not going to present like the formal syllogism argument, but I will make the point that I think morality has to be grounded in some foundation, right? So it really depends on what the syllogism looks like. But I do think you can make a moral argument. I think you can make a really good moral argument, but it only works if you kind of take like a moral contingency argument. So you basically combine contingency and morality and put it together. And, I think it could work. I just, I think Craig's argument, for example, I don't think it works. So yeah. Should we practice magic? No, I don't think we should. Yeah, that's actually not how you spell it. It's supposed to be magick, I believe. But yeah, we should. Wait, hold on. If we're talking about magic, like a magician magic, like illusion type of magic, then yeah, that's fine. But if we're talking about like more serious stuff, like the stuff that I kind of go over, hint at in my series, no, I don't think we should do magic. But if we're talking just magician magic, like what magicians do to kind of give the illusion that something really happened, then yeah, I think that's fine. I think we should, that's not a sin to use magic. So, okay, what is your opinion on the ontological argument? Why do you think the idea? I think the ontological argument begs the question. Well, I wouldn't say beg the question. Well, actually, it does beg the question if you don't have justification for premise 1. So premise 1 is basically it's possible that God exists. Now, the issue is you need to actually show that it's possible that God exists. You can't just assume that it's possible. You have to actually provide an argument for why. So there is a way you can do that. So basically, the idea is Joshua Rasmussen actually previously presented an argument. It's called the modal contingency argument. And basically, he shows that there's different ways you can show that it's possible that God exists. And then through there, if it's possible that God exists, then God has to exist. If you just go by the modal logic of how we define a necessary being, if it's possible that a necessary being exists, then you have what's called a possible necessity, and therefore, you can use the syllogism, like a logical syllogism, to show that if it's possible that a necessary being exists, then a necessary being exists. That's just S5 modal logic. Again, I'm gonna do a video on that because I think it's very important to show that. But the ontological argument by itself doesn't prove anything. It just shows that if it's possible that God exists, then God does exist. But of course, you need justification to show why it's possible that God exists. So yeah, that's basically the idea. So when I die, he would simply let me into heaven if I ask. Oh. Well, again, we have to go by what a good God would do. So a perfect being is not going to sense. Oh wait, hold on. What do you think of the idea existing? Well, yeah, I think you can exist outside time. Sorry, I had to go back to. I think you can exist outside time, but I think if you were to have a relationship with beings in time, you would have to be temporally in time. So. Yeah. Okay. Let me try to understand this question. So again, we have to go by what makes the most sense, right? I don't think a perfect being is not going to send someone to hell, and then if that person wants to get out, God's gonna be like, "Oh no, sorry, I can't do that because you already made your decision." Like, no, that's ridiculous. So, again, I would just refer you to C.S. Lewis and all that stuff. So yeah, I think if we examine the concept of a perfect being I think would want people to get out of hell. So they just have to go through Christ. So basically there has to be some way for them to get out, and so I think the only way they can really do that is through Christ. So okay, does Dr. Oppy think similarly to Dr. Peter Adkins, who believes that mathematics can create? I don't know if Oppy's a Platonist, so I wouldn't say. I don't think math can create the universe. I think that, yeah, I'm not a Platonist, so I couldn't really say, because I've only read 2 of his books, or Oppy's books, so I wouldn't be able to do that stuff. But I mean, I guess if you're a Platonist, you could accept that. But yeah. Wait. So do you believe you were conscious before you were born? That's a good question. I think it's possible, but I think the thing we need to understand here is if we were conscious before we were born, we don't remember, obviously. So yes, I think it's possible that you could be conscious before birth, before conception. But I think I don't see. It's easier to explain the afterlife, but it's not easy to explain before life, the before life, or whatever you want to call it. So I think it's likely that we were conscious before we were born, except the only difference is that we didn't have any memories. We don't have any personality yet, right? We don't have any emotions, that sort of thing. So I think it's possible, yes, we could have been conscious before we were born. We just don't remember because we weren't building our souls yet, if you want to call it that. So yeah, I think it's possible. I haven't made a firm belief on that yet, but I do think it's definitely a strong possibility. So, okay. Why do you say God cannot destroy consciousness despite the fact the Bible says God will destroy Satan? Again, we have to make a distinction between consciousness and someone's personality. So I do think that God will destroy Satan. I think he will destroy his personality. So like that includes like things like his emotions. Like the typical word for soul in the New Testament typically didn't mean the conscious mind per se. It meant more specifically someone's like inner states, like their emotions, their feelings, their personality, stuff like that. So I do think that God will eliminate that aspect of the person, but I don't think God could eliminate their actual consciousness, because that is something, again, consciousness is the foundation for reality. So you can't annihilate consciousness. It's simply impossible. Not even God can do it, because God is consciousness, so he can't eliminate himself in that sort of way. So yeah, hold on. There's give me 1 second. Okay. There's a lot of. I'll be right back, guys. You can keep these questions going. There's a lot of them, so I'll try to get through them, but I gotta hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry guys. Someone walked in and caused a lot of noise. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. So, all right. IP's modal ontological was critiqued by YouTube atheist. I don't know. I have to watch the video, but I'm sure there's problems with it because, I mean, time. I mean, we already know through quantum mechanics that time is this emergent phenomena. So I'm not sure why you can't show that there's at least something outside of time. So I mean, if it's possible for there to be something outside of time, I don't really see what the issue is with saying that God is outside time as well. So yeah. Okay. If consciousness can't be destroyed, how is consciousness created? That's a really good question. Well, actually, I don't think consciousness can be created in the strict sense. Again, because it's the foundation. But I do think you can have what's called you can manifest consciousness in this sort of way. So instead of saying that we're kind of cut off from universal consciousness or from God, we could say that we're manifested in God in the same way of how dream characters will manifest themselves into a dream world, essentially. So again, that's just an analogy, but I do think you can bypass what's called the decombination problem, because we're not saying that, hold on. Okay, so we're not saying that consciousness is like cut out from universal consciousness. So there's no decombination problem, because we're not saying that there's a subject that's being cut out from another subject. Rather, what we're saying is that a subject can manifest itself within another subject's subconscious. So in the same way of how dream characters will, manifest themselves into a dream world. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think that's possible. And I also think that dream characters also have their own personalities and, stuff like that. So I think that's probably the best. I would have to think about that more, but I don't think consciousness itself can be created. But I do think that you can manifest some sort of personality in there. So, okay, what do you think is the best argument for idealism? That's a good question. There's actually there's a lot of new arguments that I discovered these past this past month, thanks to a pessimistic idealism. He's been presenting a lot of new arguments that I didn't really know about. Currently, my favorite argument would probably be just from basic. I wouldn't call it an argument per se, but it's more about examining the theory itself. So basically, arguing that idealism is the simplest explanation, and that it's not just simple, but it also has the greatest explanatory power. So I wouldn't say I have a favorite argument per se, but I do think you can use certain arguments to show why idealism is this best theory of the mind, the best theory of explaining the nature of reality. So again, it's not really an argument per se, but it's more of like an overview of looking at why idealism is the simplest and has the best explanatory power. So yeah. Okay, is J.S. Strobel a good author? I don't know who J.S. Strobel is, actually, unless I don't. Yeah, I can't recall. I don't know if anyone mentioned it to me in the past. But yeah, I think I don't know. You have to recommend it to me. I don't think I've ever heard of him, but I could be wrong. We'll see. How does the soul interact with the brain? Well, I think the brain. I don't think it interacts in that sort of way. I think the brain is the extrinsic appearance of the soul. So basically, when you look at someone's brain, you're looking at their conscious experiences from a third person perspective. In the same way as if, like when we look out to the universe, we're looking at God's extrinsic appearance of his thoughts. In the same way, when you look at someone's brain, you're looking at the extrinsic appearance of their mind. So, yeah. Let's see. I don't think there's. Oh wait, hold on. I'm trying to make sure I'm not skipping any questions here. So, sorry for the background. They keep on slamming doors in my freaking house. Okay. Yeah, I know. I know. It's ridiculous. Like I should have done this later today, but yeah, whatever. I don't care. Okay. If the soul can't be destroyed, isn't it unfair to trap someone in the fallen state for finite sins? I no. Because the fall. If you watched my video on fallen state and salvation metaphysics, the fallen state is an inner condition of the mind. So it's not that God causes someone to be in the fallen state, but rather it's that it's an inner condition. So basically, it's caused by the person themselves, and the only way you could escape from that is if you basically, if you want to call it this, you would have to basically marry God. I don't like that word, but that's the best description I can give. Again, I'm not talking about marriage in the romantic sense. I'm talking marriage and kind of like having this, I guess you can call it a spiritual connection to God. And then what that does is that allows you to have the same mindset as God. And so, then you'll be out of the fallen state in that sort of way. So yeah. How do you explain Christ being crucified in the flesh? Again, I think if we're talking about in the flesh, that's not saying anything about the ontology of nature. So that's not saying that this flesh is outside of consciousness. So under the idealist view, you would just say that, the physical substance we call flesh is within universal consciousness. And basically everything that's physical, you can call it physical, but everything that's physical would be within this consciousness or within this mental reality. So I think that sort of argument doesn't really work, but yeah. Okay, let me see here. I've heard this objection to the fine-tuning argument that we don't know if the universe is finely tuned for life because we don't have other universes to compare it to. Yeah, I don't think that argument, it's a red herring. I've heard that objection before, but I think the problem is that it ignores the very evidence that we have that our universe is finely tuned. Just because we can't look at other universes doesn't mean that the argument doesn't work. Again, and what I'm trying to say is we have to go by the evidence that we have for fine-tuning, not the evidence that we don't have for fine-tuning. So if we have evidence for like another universe, and if we can get like, let's say 1,000 different universes and examine them all, then maybe the fine-tuning argument could be rebutted in that sort of way. But right now, we have to go by the evidence we have. We have to go by the sample that we have, not by what we don't have. So that's what I would say. But yeah. All right, let me see here. Oh wait. Oh, I know that book. Okay, now I know what you're talking. Before I had no idea what John was talking about. But okay, that's fine. I do think that Sobel. I haven't read his book, so I can't. I guess I'm just going based off of what other people have told me. But other people have told me that he's basically the old Oppy. So before Graham Oppy, Sobel was like the best atheist philosopher before he passed away. So sorry if I. Thanks for the book, because I know what that book is. I just couldn't remember the exact name. But yeah. Oh wait, hold on. I think I skipped. Hold on, sorry. Let me. What's your evidence? Again, we have to go by. The evidence, or at least the argument for idealism, right? So if everything physical is within this universal consciousness, or at least if we're going to say that the ontology of the physical thing is itself a mental thing, but now that would be the evidence for that. So yeah. Do you think universalism is possible? Would it mean that Jesus would mean anything if? Oh yeah, I mean, I do think that universalism is actually very plausible. I don't hold to it in the strict sense, so I would hold to like more of a universalism, what I call universalism lit. So basically, the idea is that I'm hoping that everybody will be saved, and it's possible that everybody could be saved, but I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen. So yeah, I would have to, because I know a few universalists that have pretty good points to make, and there's also anti-universalists that make arguments against universalism. But I would probably hold to like a more moderate position. So basically, that it's possible. Yes, it's possible. I think it's probable, but I can't say for sure if that's actually the case. Okay, what's your evidence that Paul wasn't talking about a physical nature? So again, we have to understand that Paul probably had probably did not have the same sort of metaphysical categories that we have today, because especially back then, like they talked about the mind in terms of like they literally thought that thoughts were like in our stomach, and I don't think that's true, obviously. So again, we have to look at the culture context. We have to look at. I don't think Paul was referring to a physical substance that exists outside of consciousness. So, and plus that would also contradict theism, because if everything is contingent on God, and if you have something that's outside the mind of God, then well, that's going to be a problem, because then that would mean you'd have a physical substance that basically can exist without God, and that's that contradicts pretty much all of theism. So I don't think I would seriously doubt that Paul was talking about a physical substance in the metaphysical way where we say that there's, something outside consciousness. So okay, nice to see my guy. Too bad I do. Hey man, like John, I take man's word over God's word. Okay, sorry, but I'm gonna do it because I can. All right. So yeah, whatever. I'll just admit to it. I know Michael won't do it. Michael Jones will not admit that he is taking man's word over God's word. I will say I take man's word over God's word because that's what I do. Because I can do what I want. All right. Sorry, I got carried away there, but yeah. So whatever. Okay. Was the foreprayer for atheism before Graham Oppy? I agree. He used mathematics and the analytic philosophy to analyze theistic arguments. Include again, I have to read his books, but I mean, I would. I don't know. I'm still right now. I'm researching New Testament stuff, so I don't know if I'll ever get to his stuff. But I did read Graham Oppy's work, arguing about gods, and I do think that it is interesting to see these criticisms, right? And I do think at least the majority of the arguments that Oppy analyzed, I don't think work. I think he made some pretty good points, but again, we have to understand there's different types of arguments as well. For example, like Graham Oppy, he argued against the PSR, which I don't think it worked. I don't think his criticisms of the principle of sufficient reason worked. But yeah, again, I'll have to read his book. So that may take a while because right now I spent like $500 on New Testament stuff. So I gotta read that first before I get back to the other interesting stuff. But thanks for the recommendation. I mean, I do think that he was the torchbearer of atheism before Oppy. So yeah. Okay. How would you define the soul? Basically, someone's personality, someone's like personalities, emotions, their thoughts, or at least their self-reflexive thinking, right? So I think that's how I would define it. So basically, there's consciousness, and then you have the soul that's within consciousness, and that's basically someone's personality and stuff like that. So, okay. You said we have to have evidence for multiverse. Why don't you need evidence for... Well, I do think we need evidence, but I think that like you can establish idealism to be true without empirical arguments. So there's one argument that I have. Well, actually, that pessimistic idealism, he kind of wrote it out in a Discord server, and I'm going to do a video on it eventually. But basically, it's an argument against the existence of matter. So there are certain what's called a priori arguments against, or at least a priori arguments for idealism that'll argue against other positions. And I do think that that's definitely. I think you can actually show that idealism can better explain that sort of a priori evidence than other alternatives. So, yeah. Okay, there's no reason. Oh wait, hold on. No, let me look it up. Hold on. Patristic. All right, let's see here. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to look it up, but there's no like solid definition. Okay. I'll be. Yeah. I agree. Wow. Okay. That's actually just going based off of this PowerPoint presentation that I'm looking at right here. Wow, I actually would agree with patristic universalism. Wow, I mean, I didn't think that was okay. I guess I accept that view because I mean, here's the thing. I do think that you can be saved after you die. So I think like if someone never heard the gospel, they can be saved. If someone rejected God and then changed their mind later, they could be saved. Stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, that's just, again, we just got to look at what a perfect being would do, and I think that's what it would do. So yeah. Okay. Your opinion on souls and resurrected, new bodies and new heaven. I do think they will. I think, well, obviously, I think, the resurrection is going to happen here on this physical reality. And then what will happen is, I mean, I've been kind of speculating about whether or not, like, purgatory is another universe. I don't know if it is. It could be. It's possible. It could be, but yeah, I think ultimately we will come back here. So even if it is another universe, we'll come back to this universe and, be resurrected. And yeah, so that's how it is. Okay. What is your best evidence to show that the universe had a beginning? Well, actually, if I'm going to be honest, the best evidence I would say would be simply that eternal universe models are ad hoc and that the standard model is the simplest one. However, I'm actually agnostic on whether the universe had a beginning. And I'm also agnostic on whether an infinite regress fails. And this is actually very important because the next series I'm working on, which is the foundation theory, I'm going to argue that even if the universe is eternal, so even if the universe always existed, there would still have to be a foundation to ground that existence. Same thing with the infinite regress. Even if there's an infinite regress of like infinite universes, you would still need a foundation for those infinite universes. And that's basically the foundation theory. And I'll go into it more when I do the series, but that's basically the idea. So because of that, because the foundation theory is compatible with an eternal universe and an infinite regress, then I do think I'm agnostic on whether there is an infinite regress or whether the universe is eternal. Again, we have to look at the evidence, but yeah. So yeah. Have you read mythicist authors like Robert Price? I have. Well, not their full books, but I have read like essays written by them. So there's an essay about the spiritual Christ by Richard Carrier. I've also read Robert Price's book on the empty tomb. Well, not the empty tomb, but an essay he did on the empty tomb. So I've read his stuff, but not totally, not all of his books. So, okay. How would you differentiate yourself from Berkeley's subjective? So I think Berkeley's, So subjective idealism, it depends on how you define it, but I don't think so like, for example, I think the universe still exists even if we're not looking, okay? The only distinction is I think when we're not looking, it's not in a physical form, so it's not in a well-defined state. In other words, there's a wave function that exists beyond our perceptions that represents the objective reality. Donald Hoffman also makes the same point. He says that there is an objective reality beyond what we can perceive, but that objective reality is conscious agent. So basically, the basic idea is that the objective reality beyond our perceptions is not the physical universe that we perceive, but rather there's other conscious agents that give that basically give that impression. So it's basically like it's I guess the best analogy with like a computer game where basically there's like a code, right? There's like this code that exists beyond the perceptions of the character that you're playing, but there's no there's no rendered universe, or there's no rendered world within that virtual reality that exists. It only exists relative to whoever's perceiving it. So yeah. What do you think keeps atheists from believing in if the evidence is so strong? Again, that's a good question. I mean, I think that people are atheists. I mean, there's different reasons, but I feel like a lot of it has to do with emotional biases, and obviously biases are something that's very common. I mean, people are just not going to accept the evidence regardless of what you give them, right? So you just got to take that into account, that basically that it's just going to be, people are not going to be convinced, right? So there's flat earthers that exist, right? There's people that believe the earth is flat. There's people that still believe in the geocentric universe. Again, just, you can't convince everybody, right? And some people, I mean, I can understand why some people may be atheists. Like, if an atheist came up to me and, presented like the logical problem of evil, or, the problem of evil in general, I can understand why, at least from their perspective, why they're an atheist or whatever, or why, they think that God is not good. So again, there's different reasons, but I think it's just biases, honestly. So, yeah. You don't even know. Well, actually, okay, so let me clarify. Genesis 1 is talking about function, so I wouldn't accept the view that Genesis 1 is talking about an absolute beginning point. There's actually, I can't remember what it was, but there was this analysis of Genesis 1:1, and it basically argued that there is no reference to an absolute beginning point from that thing. In fact, if you look at the ancient Near Eastern context, if you go by, I go by John Walton's interpretation. So basically, it's talking about the function. So when it says that in the original language didn't have in the beginning, it said rather there's the alternative was when God created the heavens and the earth. So if we're talking about when, then that's not an absolute beginning. That's something that's starting with the period of time, but before that there is a pre-chaotic state that existed. For that, I recommend IP stuff on that. So I actually don't think the Bible itself teaches that the universe had a beginning. Okay, I think the best we can, at least, and not in the strict sense. But I do think that God would have to be the foundation for reality. So even if the universe is eternal, I think that there has to be a foundation, or God, that kind of upholds the reality. So I think he will, but I think at that point, most people will have an understanding of why evil is not a good thing, and I think eventually through sanctification and stuff like that, I think it'll eventually stop. So yeah. But yeah, I do think it's possible. If people do get saved, if they change their minds in hell, how does? I don't think no. Because I think that in order for people to be saved at all, Christ had to die, or at least Christ had to be crucified. So I think the mechanism, again, I'll probably have to do a video on this in the future, but basically, in order for anybody to be saved at all, Christ had to die for them. That doesn't make Christ's crucifixion meaningless. It just means that Christ is the only way that you can be saved, regardless if it's here in this life or in hell. So again, it really just depends. But okay, let me see here. Why do you say that it's agnostic the universe had a beginning when Dr. Rob Koons has worked on? Again, I'm happy to be convinced that the universe did have a beginning. It's very. I think it's more. I think it's more probable that the universe did have a beginning. I think the evidence actually favors a beginning universe better than the eternal universe. But I don't have any solid position on that because you have to look at eternal universe models and stuff like that. So, yeah. Has God ever answered a prayer from you in a supernatural way? Maybe. If he did, I probably don't remember, but I think it's possible, yeah. So, like you explained, these straightforward. Well, again, you have to look at we have to look at the ancient Near Eastern context. You can't just pick up an English translation of Genesis 1 and be like, oh, well, it says it right there. No, you gotta look at the ancient context. You gotta look at syntactical analysis of the original very first verse. So I think it's very important that we do that. We use scholarly work and we actually understand what it's trying to get at, because it wasn't. If we're gonna be honest here, Genesis 1 was not written in English, so we gotta do the hard work and basically go by what's the most probable interpretation of that. So, yeah. What's your response to the evidential problem? That's a very long answer I could give. I don't have time to give my full answer to that question right now, but I do think that you could combine a few. So, like, for example, like Clayton Jones has a pretty good theodicy on it that basically that the evidential problem isn't really, it's not that big of an issue because of the fact that we need to be sanctified and that we chose to live in this evil world, stuff like that. Again, I'll eventually do a video series on the problem of evil. So, but it's a pretty long answer. So I can't give my full answer here, but I do take the problem of evil very seriously, and I do think it needs to be addressed. So, okay, let me see here. How do you prove the existence of the supernatural? Well, just look at, if you go to my videos called Quantum Hermeticism #2, Deriving the Principle of Mentalism. That doesn't prove the supernatural, but it does show that the universe basically is an emergent construct. And my definition of supernatural is simply anything outside of the physical space-time universe. So basically, I would say that, like, conscious agents are supernatural beings. Again, if you don't like that definition, that's fine. You can also call them natural or extra natural or whatever. I don't really like the distinction between natural and supernatural, but I do mention it in the series just because that's typically the proper way of understanding it. So, yeah. Okay. Kyle, why don't God intervene from time to time, like preventing a baby getting shot or someone getting raped? Or yeah, I think, why doesn't God intervene? If he did intervene, then we could never learn the consequences of what sin is. So if we're just talking moral evil, so if we're not talking about natural, because that's a whole different subject, natural evil. But if we're just talking moral evil, if God were to prevent every single evil occurrence, then we could never learn the consequences of sin. So basically, the fact that evil exists and the fact that we find evil so disgusting is it's God's way of trying to tell us, like, hey, you shouldn't do that, right? So the fact that God doesn't intervene means that he's trying to send us, that he's basically saying that this is what sin does to you. This is the consequences of sin. And the only way that you are going to ever stop doing this, or the only way that you're going to ever overcome this problem of sin, is if you basically turn to God. And that's again, there's a whole different answer I could give to that question. But I think if God were to stop every single instance of sin, that we could never understand the consequences that sin causes, and so therefore we're never going to really turn to God in a strong sort of way, because we're never going to learn the consequences of our actions. And so yeah. Okay, when I pointed out that soul means throat, you ignored it. Looked at the Hebrew. Well, again, I'm not, my view of the soul doesn't, I guess, I'm not sure if Paul's definition of soul would include an actual conscious agent or conscience itself. I think it just talks about like someone's personality and so on and so. Again, I'll have to look at the Hebrew for that to kind of get at least the full definition of what soul means. But yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, like, when you talk about soul, I think that there's actually like there's certain Christian physicalists that would actually say that that definition shows that a soul has to be physical. And I think it's very, I think they present persuasive arguments. And again, you have to look at the cultural context, stuff like that. But it's funny because there are a lot of Christian physicalists that have written on the word soul, and they've showed that definition does not fit with the substance dualist definition, but rather it could actually fit with a physicalist explanation of what the soul actually means. So again, I have to look at that sort of thing. But yeah. You seem more interested in philosophy. Yeah, I am. Philosophy is definitely something, because for me, I have to start off with philosophy, right? So I basically established that there's a perfect being that exists as a foundation for reality, and then from there I kind of interpret scripture from that or whatever. That isn't to say that biblical studies isn't important. I'm not saying that at all. I just think that the priority should be philosophy in that sort of way. So yeah. We've come up at an hour now. So if you guys have any more questions, let me know. I'm probably gonna end this a little earlier because I have to help out my family members, but I'll let you guys. I'll give you guys like a minute, and then I'll probably close it off if I don't get any more questions. All right, looks like I have some. There's a few questions. Let's see. Oh wait, hold on. How's the changing of degree? You said you want to take IT. I recommend mathematics and computer science. Math might help in philosophy of religion or philosophy of mathematics. Well, actually, I'm not going to take philosophy of mathematics. I'm not good at math at all. I suck at math. But what I'll probably do is I'll probably get what's called a certificate. And so basically the idea is that I would get a certificate in IT that doesn't really require that much math, and then from there I can get pretty much any job I want, like working for a private company or whatever. But I definitely want to get there. Okay, this will be the last question, unless someone else has something else to say. Okay, book recommendations. There's a lot of books, I would say. So the first one I would recommend is How Reason Can Lead to God. The next one would be The Idea of the World by Bernardo Kastrup. The next one would be Arguing About Gods by Graham Oppy. That one's pretty intense to read. That one's high, that's very technical, but I would also recommend that as well. And then, of course, Natural Companion to Natural Theology. I mean, there's a lot of them. Ones in Idealism, just probably Bernardo Kastrup is fine. Also, the Corner Hermetica. That's something else that I would recommend people also read. It's not really an academic book, but it's where it's based on a lot of the stuff that I did in the series is based on that book. And I had to ask the authors if I could do a series on that, and they said that's fine. So yeah, there's a lot. So okay, let me see here. Got one more question. Check out Peter S. Williams, A Christian Introduction to Philosophy. Yep, I'll check them out. So yeah, all right. Well, I did reach 900 subscribers. I'll probably do the question and answers again once I reach 1,000. I did it today simply because I got this new camera, and so I wanted to show it off. But whatever. So yeah, the next question and answer session I'll do once I reach 1,000 subscribers, and I'll try to answer the best I can. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and thanks for your questions. So I don't think I skipped anyone else. So yep. Later, guys. Thanks for watching.